Welcome, everyone. I'm Diana Winston, and I'm the Director of Mindfulness Education at UCLA's Mindful Awareness Research Center. I'm going to talk to you today about mindfulness for health and well-being. And if you have any questions, you can go on Twitter and use the hashtag UCLAMDChat. Okay, first of all, I'm wondering how many people feel like this. I do from time to time, and I'm sure all of us do, sort of exhausted, overwhelmed, stressed out. What we're going to learn about today is mindfulness, and mindfulness is paying attention to our present moment experiences with openness and curiosity and a willingness to be with what is. So that's the definition that I like to use for mindfulness, and it's an antidote to the stress that you just saw in that image. So potential benefits for you are the reduction of stress and the help of improving attention. It can help cultivate self-awareness and emotional regulation. It can improve our relationships with our work relationships, family relationships, friendships, patients, colleagues. It's a helpful self-care tool. So what I want to do now is talk for a little bit about the mindfulness and health research. So the field of mindfulness is fairly young. The first studies were done in the early 70s, but there were only a few studies done then. And then it's gone and it's increased significantly. So now there's about 3,000 research studies on mindfulness. However, although that sounds like a lot, it's still an early field. So if you were to see how many studies there are for heart disease and exercise, you would probably find showing that exercise improves heart disease, you would probably find about 50,000 studies. So you can see that the mindfulness research is early. However, it's very promising and exciting because it's an intervention that anyone can do of any background. It doesn't matter about your background, your religion, your health condition. There's so many possibilities for doing mindfulness, and therefore it's a really promising tool. So in the health field, they've done a lot of research looking at mindfulness, and much of it shows it's connected to boosting the immune system, to reducing inflammation, as I have on this slide. There's some research looking at how genetic markers of inflammation are positively impacted through doing mindfulness practice. So it can reduce actually these long-term chronic illnesses. It can reduce the inflammation associated with these long-term chronic illnesses. One of the early research studies was looking at how mindfulness helps with the healing response. And so this was a psoriasis study done in the late 90s. And typically what happens for psoriasis, the typical treatment is like you see on the screen, it's like almost like a tanning booth. UVB rays to the skin. What they did in this particular study is they had some people practice along mindfulness, listening to an audio recording, and some people did the treatment as usual. The people who did the meditation along with the treatment healed 3 times faster than the people who didn't. This was one of the early studies and a very interesting and promising study about the relationship between mindfulness and healing. As I said, it's known to boost the immune system, promote the healing response, and help with stress-related physical conditions like high blood pressure and so forth. Now, mindfulness is also helpful for mental health. So this is an image just here of how the depression, anxiety, panic cycle that many of us get into. With mindfulness, we can learn to almost short-circuit this. We can learn to not get caught in the ruminations that lead to levels of anxiety and depression. Because mindfulness is so helpful, it's been incorporated into a variety of clinical treatments. So mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for depression, acceptance and commitment therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy for borderline personality disorder. But you don't have to have a particular clinical diagnosis, although it can be helpful for those populations. If you have the normal anxiety and depression that pretty much we all face, being in the modern world, 21st century anxiety, getting the kids to school on time, going through all your responsibilities, all of those things, mindfulness is helpful as well. This was an interesting study that was looking at the impact of mindfulness on happiness or well-being. How does it impact our mood? So there was a study done where they buzzed people on their smartphone and they asked them 3 questions. And this was done to about a subject size of about 2,500 people all across the world, I believe. And they asked them 3 questions. Random intervals, they were asked, what are you doing? Is your mind on it? And how is your mood? How are you feeling? And what they found was that if people reported that their mind was on what they were doing, they reported being happier than if their mind was somewhere else. So if you're doing something, and this was shown to be true, even if it was something that people don't typically like to do. So let's say you don't like to wash the dishes, and you're sitting there washing the dishes, and you're stressing about all the things you have to do at work tomorrow. You're not going to be happier. It's pretty intuitively obvious. But what it may not be so intuitively obvious is that if you bring your attention into the present moment and focus on the feel of the dishes, of the warmth, of the sound of the water, staying in your body, connected and present, people reported happiness, more ease, and more of a sense of well-being. So staying in the present moment leads to more general happiness and well-being. Mindfulness has been looked at from the level of attention. And in fact, years ago, we did a study at UCLA looking at students, both adolescents, kids, and adults who had ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or just attention deficit disorder. And we found that after 8 weeks of meditation that people were able to stay focused. And that was a very exciting thing, especially because people were surprised that they could get adolescents to meditate. And when the scientists looked at the research, they said, well, what kind of medication did you put them on? And we said, no, it was meditation, not medication. So this particular study I have here was done at UC Santa Barbara a few years back. And what they did was they looked at students who were studying for the GREs. And they had them, they were concerned about the reading portion of the GREs, that people get distracted. So they were taught mindfulness, which helped them to stay in the present moment. Whenever their mind got distracted, they came back into the present moment. And the people who did the mindfulness portion of the study, they got a 16 percentile point higher, a boost on the GREs. Now, why is this the case? Well, when you're reading something that's interesting, it's very easy to stay attentive. If you're reading a novel that you love, or it's very easy to stay focused. If you're reading something dense, it's hard to stay focused, or something boring, it's hard to stay focused. Now, probably most of your life you've been told, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. But you probably weren't told how to pay attention. So in this study, people were taught how to pay attention. When your attention wanders, you bring it back. And we'll be practicing this today, so you'll see what I mean. But what this did was it increased people's ability to be successful on the GREs. Last area I'll mention is the area of neuroscience, and this one is an impact on brain structure. Now, there's been a lot of neuroscience. Again, the field is still very young, but this was a study, one of the early studies done about 10 years ago out of Harvard with Sarah Lazar, who looked at the brains of advanced meditators. So these were people who had been meditating, maybe 20, 30, 40 years living in caves in the Himalayas. These are what you might think of as the Olympic athletes of meditation. They're very serious meditators. And what she did was she looked at their brains and compared them to people of the same age range. So I don't know if you know this, but as you age, your brain thins out. If you want something else to worry about, there you go. It's called age-related cortical decline. So people's brains thin out as they age. Well, in the advanced meditators, when they looked at the structure of their brains and they compared it to people of their own same age range, and these were these 2 areas that were shown, they did not thin out. And these 2 areas are the prefrontal cortex and the insular cortex. Okay, the prefrontal cortex is what we think of as the CEO of our brain. It's responsible for executive functioning, for delayed gratification, for working memory, for impulse control, for emotional regulation. This part of the brain in the advanced meditators was thicker, had more neurons than in the brain of an average person. So this is very interesting, except you're listening and you're saying, great, these are the people who've been practicing for 40 years. Oh, also this other area, the insular cortex, which is connected to empathy as well. They were also thicker. But what about an average person or a person who's never begun? Well, some studies have looked at the brain changes on even a novice meditator. And they found that after an 8-week course of average of 27 minutes a day of meditation practice, they have found minute structural changes in the brain. So this is very promising for people who are just starting out, and for all of us, especially as we meditate over time. So I want to go back to what is mindfulness. I've just given you an overview of the science, and as I said, it's a young field, but it's also very promising and lots of possibilities. But what is it? And really the best way to understand mindfulness is to do it yourself, and we'll be doing it together in a little bit. But let's talk about what exactly mindfulness is. So the definition I use is paying attention to present moment experiences with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with what is. Mindfulness keeps our mind from being lost in the past or the future. If you were to check into your mind at any point in the day, you would probably notice that you're lost in the past, replaying it, going over it, thinking about, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Ruminating, feeling bad. That's what happens to most people. A lot of other people, or other times in the day, and the same person, we're in the future, planning, worrying, obsessing, catastrophizing, worst case scenario. And our minds tend to go back and forth between the two, back and forth. Now, sometimes we're in the present moment, but oftentimes we're in the present moment wishing it were a different present moment. This is what our minds typically are like, and this is a slide that I think is familiar to all of us. Did I lock the door? Bills, is it something I ate? Right, just the way our mind, especially at night, gets lost in all sorts of ruminations. So mindfulness is an antidote to this. Mindfulness teaches us to come back into the present moment. And the stress lies in the thinking that takes us into the past or into the future. But if we can stay in the moment, there's so much more sense of peace, ease, and well-being. Mindfulness also counteracts what we think of as automaticity. So automaticity is that automatic pilot that we get on. We just go through life, and the next thing we know, the day is over, and you don't even remember what happened. Do you ever get in the car and get out of the car and realize, I have no idea what just happened in between? That happens all the time. And so with mindfulness, we can learn to find a way to inhabit our lives, to live more fully in the present moment. Now this slide, maybe you know who this guy is. Some people do, some people don't. Depends on the generation perhaps. But this is Mr. Magoo. And Mr. Magoo is the icon for people who are not paying attention. You know, just going through life on automatic pilot, he just ends up in the manhole. Of course, he was very cheerful about the whole thing, but this is what happens for most people. We're just on autopilot, and we miss our lives. So with mindfulness, we can inhabit our lives more fully, have more gratitude, appreciation, ease, joy in the midst of life. The last thing I'll say about mindfulness is it's something we already know and experience. This is not some mystical thing that I'm pulling out of thin air. It's not something new agey. It is a full experience of what it means to be a human being. We've all experienced mindfulness. Think about taking a walk in nature, or being with a child who's so fully present, or in the midst of sports, athletic activity where you're really in the flow of the experience, or in the midst of creative activity. All of these are a type of mindfulness that we all know, that every single one of us has experienced. It's an opportunity where we're just fully in the moment. And children are like this, right? Children, you know children, they are in the moment. But here's some news for you. You were like that too. You were living in the moment, but then what happened? You grew up, you got educated, you had your difficulties in life, and so on. But that seed of mindfulness is within you. And then all of us have this opportunity with different tools and practices to return to something we already know. It's already inside us. So I want to make sure we have an actual experience of this. And so I'm going to ask you, for those who are listening at home, to just get comfortable. We're going to practice some mindfulness. So just if you're sitting in the chair, you don't even need to watch me anymore. You can close your eyes. You don't have to meditate with your eyes closed, but if you want to keep them open, just keep them mostly looking downward, not all around the room, so you won't be distracted. Most people prefer to close their eyes, but really it's up to you. And you want to be sitting upright, your back upright, feet on the floor, or just in a comfortable position. We're going to do about 5-7 minutes of this meditation. Hands are resting comfortably on your lap or wherever, on your knees. And let's begin by taking a few deep breaths. And as we take these deep breaths, just allow yourself to consider the possibility of relaxation, of ease, of well-being. Inviting in some relaxation, just a few breaths to help us feel a little bit more grounded, connected to ourselves. We might notice the sounds around us, the sounds in the room, sound of my voice, sounds outside the room. We don't have to be in a completely quiet place to practice mindfulness. So see if you can just listen to the sounds as they come and go. Curious, open. Sound after sound. If your mind starts thinking about the sound or reacting to the sound, just bring it back to the listening. And now notice your body present on the chair or couch or wherever you are. Just notice your body. What do you feel in your body? There's heaviness and lightness, pressure, movement. Can you feel your feet on the floor? There's hardness, pressure, touch. Notice your back, stomach areas, your stomach tense or tight. See if you can soften it a little bit. Notice any areas in your body that might feel tense. And if you notice them, just gently soften and breathe. So let's turn our attention to our breathing. Where do you feel your breath the clearest in your body? Maybe you notice your abdomen rising and falling, expanding and contracting with each breath. Let your breath be natural, in and out through your nose. You don't have to lengthen it or shorten it, just keep it natural. Maybe you notice your breath in your chest, rising and falling, expanding and contracting with each breath. Can you notice the air moving through your nose? There's tingling and vibration and temperature changes. Let's pick something to focus on for the duration of this meditation. We're only going to do a couple of minutes. Something that was easy for you, either your abdomen, your chest, your nose, or you can keep listening to the sounds like we did in the beginning of the meditation. So keep your attention on one thing, your abdomen rising and falling, or the sounds coming and going, breath after breath, sound after sound. As you do this, you may find that your attention begins to wander. If this happens, that's completely normal. This is what most minds do. They wander. So when you notice your attention has wandered, gently bring it back to your main focus. And you'll just keep doing that again and again. So I'm going to be silent for about a minute or two, probably 2 minutes. And we'll practice this on our own and just see what happens. If other things come up, you can just notice them, but go back to your experience of staying with your breath or listening to the sound, attention wandering, and then coming back. Now let's notice how we're feeling as we bring this short meditation to a close. Just notice what's happening in your body and mind. Letting whatever is here be here. If you're feeling more relaxed, great. Enjoy that feeling of relaxation and ease. If you're feeling something other than that, just notice what it is and let yourself be present to your full experience. So take one more breath with awareness, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So the practice we just did is a fundamental mindfulness practice. It's a basic practice that anyone can do. You can do it for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a great amount of time for someone who wants to get started and experience the health and the benefits of mindfulness. So I just suggest finding a place that's quiet in your home if possible and just begin the process exactly as we did. I'll give you some resources for guided meditation before we end today, so you don't have to do it alone and in complete silence. You can actually be talked through the process. But just starting with 5 minutes and seeing how that goes. Maybe after a while you might do 10 or 15, 20. A good amount of time is about 20 minutes, but I want to make sure that people can really add it to their lives. And I think everybody can do 5 minutes. Well, I hope most people can. So let me see now if there are any particular questions. Oh, that's the resources. I'm going to go back to that in a minute. First of all, let's see if there's some questions at the hashtag UCLAMDChat. I think questions are coming. Let me just answer a question I know you're having. I'm intuiting. Some of you fell asleep when you meditated, am I right? Or got really close to it. It's a really normal thing. This happens all the time when people meditate. They get sleepy. If you're finding yourself getting sleepy while you're meditating, you can just open your eyes. You can even stand up. That's a good thing to do. And my guess is you probably, like most people on the planet, don't get enough sleep. So if mindfulness gives you a gentle respite in the middle of your day, it's not a terrible thing. Over time, you learn to practice during a time of day when you're least likely to get sleepy. Okay, here's some questions. Can I meditate in the office? Can I meditate in the office with eyes open? And the answer is absolutely. So mindfulness is a meditation. It's also a quality of attention that we can bring to any moment in our day. So it doesn't mean necessarily that you would be in the office and you'd tell your coworkers to be quiet and you sit there and do that. But what you can do is you can take a mindful breath. You can feel your feet on the floor. Right now, I just encourage you, wherever you are, just everybody just notice your feet on the floor. And just feel the hardness and the pressure. And notice the weight. It's very simple, it's neutral, it's not that exciting one way or another, but it brought you into the present moment. You can take a mindful breath before you go into a meeting. So we can bring the qualities of mindfulness into our lives. Some people even have bells that ring on their computer every half an hour and remind them to be mindful. Or if you do a physical job, you can bring your attention to the physicality of your experience, washing, cleaning, whatever it is. Mindfulness can be brought into any part of our life. As I said, it's cultivated through a meditation practice, but it's also a quality of attention you could have at any moment. Or more? And I'll answer one more question, which is if your mind wandered during the meditation, the guided meditation, you were completely normal. This is what happens. Our minds wander. It's a very adaptive function that our mind wander. We're always looking out for threats. So when you sit down and try to be quiet, you'll probably notice that your mind thought about everything under the sun. This is not a problem. What we do is we train the mind to come back again and again, and over time it gets easier. This is what the science of neuroplasticity teaches us, that we can actually change our brains depending on what we do with it. We can create new neural pathways. So if it felt hard, challenging, don't be daunted. Just give it a try. It gets easier over time, and you're not doing anything wrong if you couldn't stay focused, because it's the process of learning to do it that the skill develops, just like any skill that you would do. So let me go back and give you some resources. This is my book, Fully Present, The Science, Art, and Practice of Mindfulness, that I co-wrote with a scientist, Dr. Susan Smalley. And it has a lot of good practical instruction as well as the science of mindfulness. And then our center, the UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center, and this is our website, offers free classes, programs, meditations, and much of it is online. So there's some online classes that you could take if you want to go more deeply into it. Our biggest resource is many, many free meditations. We have a 5-minute meditation, a 10-minute meditation, 20 minutes. You can, anything you want, 30 minutes, well, maybe not anything you want, but lots and lots of meditations that are possible. If you're interested, please go on the website and check that out. And otherwise, I'm really happy to have been here and wish you all a great day. Thank you.